everyone, and welcome back to the Blue Balloon Theatre podcast. I am joined today by none other than the brilliant Tom Stocks, a.k.a. the Chubby Northerner. You might know Tom through his social media. He does loads of stuff on TikTok. His poetry seems to be all across the UK at the minute, and I'm going to pick his brains about that in a minute. But Tom, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm a little bit tired because I was gigging in Leeds till 1 a.m. last night. But yeah, I'm good. I'm here. I'm ready to go.
Amazing. You seem to be everywhere at the minute. Like, you've been doing stuff in Liverpool, you were in Leeds last night. How's the poetry stuff going?
Really good. I think I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I can go to these places. I'm being asked to go to these places. But I think I've made a real effort to try and break out of the Manchester poetry scene, which is obviously my bread and butter, don't get me wrong. But I think I've just really tried to make the effort to go other places as well. Like I really love gigging in Liverpool at the moment. I've done loads in Liverpool, and yeah, and now I'm branching out into Leeds and stuff like that as well. And yeah, I've gone all over the country, but I've just sort of like really tried to make a staple in Liverpool as well as Manchester, and not just be the same poetry nights, the same people, and just try and get the poetry out to more people really.
Yeah, definitely. I remember the last time I saw you, you said similar that you had lots coming up in Liverpool, that you were genuinely really excited about it. And I think as a creative, as a performer, a poet, that excitement is really, it's good, it's beneficial. Do you know what I mean? I feel like quite a few poets in the Manchester scene have kind of done that recently, and it's been beneficial to them, basically. It gives them a sort of experience of another type of audience. You know, sometimes you know what it's like. You'll go to events and there'll be an audience that are really, really quiet. They're more listeners and they're not very vocally receptive. And that completely changes your performance. So that's really interesting. I wanted to speak to you as well about your positive poetry that you've been sharing. I could not mention it because it's it's just such a wonderful thing that you're doing. So for anyone that doesn't know, talk us through it. Like, how did you start sharing your poetry in that sort of way?
So just for the listeners, I basically roll up. I've got like 4 or 5 positive poems that I roll up and into like a little scroll. I tie them up, and on the top of it, I put "Open me for a smile and positivity," and I leave them on trains, I leave them on trams, I leave them in bars, restaurants, random places around different cities. And I'm lucky enough, like with my job and with poetry, it takes me to a lot of different cities and places anyway. So I can naturally just leave them in different places. But I don't know, where did it come from. I just was really wary that the world is shit for a start. And I was also getting swept up with that in my poetry sometimes, especially my social media stuff. Went into, I do a lot of comedy poetry. I do a lot about mental health and body positivity and stuff like that. But I really felt myself, especially over the election and just before, really leaning into like political poetry and stuff like that, and and that was fine. But it was really, I just felt like I was being really negative all the time.
Mm.
So I sort of started counteracting that with writing loads of positive poetry. But really, there was a few people on TikTok I saw who sort of do poetry. She called Isabel Daughter. Is that her name? I can't remember. She's a really big poet on TikTok. And just the way she looks at the camera and just like says poetry to you. And I was like, oh my God, that's so good. And there's like people that like do these like motivational quotes like to the camera. So I sort of started doing it like that, and it got really big. Like there was quite a few of my TikToks that sort of blew up, and I was like, oh, imagine I could just do this for like people. And I can't remember where the idea. Honestly, I can't remember where the idea came from. But I was like, I wonder if I could just print some off, and I'll just leave them around. And I just started it on my train into work in the morning. I'd leave like 10 on the train, and then people started like messaging me and being really like really open. People are really open. Like
Yeah.
it really shocked me how open people be after finding these poetry scrolls, and not even just like, oh my God, thank you. Like literally like, oh my God, my sister died 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And this really spoke to me, and you are incredible, and you don't understand how much I needed this today. Or there was a guy, it's just a bit random, but I was on the phone to my dad, and I sometimes like to leave them around me as well because I like to see people's reactions. But I left one on the seat across from me, and it was quite quiet anyway, so I didn't think anyone would pick it up. I was on the phone to my dad, and then I saw this guy sat down, um, and he read it, and he started like crying. But he also, the worst thing is, it's also got my socials on it, so you can never get out of it because then I can see some people look at my phone, so I'm like, oh shit, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. But he did, and then he looked at me and he's like, and I thought he'd been really aggressive at first.
Oh
Um,
my God.
and then but I was on the phone to my dad, and I was like, "Oh, Dad, I've got to go." And then he was like, "Is this you?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is." He was like, "Mate, you have no idea how much I needed this today because he'd just gone for a brain scan, um, and was said he just received some really bad news, and that his mental health was really deteriorating. And we just had a really open, honest discussion about male mental health on the train. And yeah, it was just mad. And that's not like I've had loads of conversations like that, and people are messaging and things like that. It's just been a really, I mean, it should be a social experiment, to be quite honest with you, because it's just
Yeah.
mad. Um, but people are so honest, and people just open up. Like in their first message, they'll just tell me like what they're going through. I'm like a poetry therapist. Um, but yeah, that's sort of it, really.
That's amazing. Honestly, when you were telling that story just then, I could feel myself like welling up.
Yeah,
That's so special. And like
yeah,
the fact that you decided to sort of turn that really sort of, I don't want to say negative energy, but very political, intense energy into something a bit more positive, and you sort of went, you know what, I'm just going to try it. Sometimes taking that leap of faith can make such a difference to you and to other people. And I'm sure as well you feel a little bit enlightened as well through that whole
definitely.
process, and it's something that you're still doing as well. I must admit I have found a scroll myself, and it is very, very special, and
Yeah,
it genuinely, it lifted me in a way that I wasn't expecting. And obviously I knew you were doing it, like I know your style of writing. And I've always found your style of writing very relatable. It's very funny, it's very cheeky as well. But that's the wonderful thing about it. It's, if if you're looking for escapism in poetry, then I would direct people to you in the best way possible. Talk to us about your book as well, because you do have a book out, and I'm interested to know whether you're working on any other collections as well.
no, I'm not. Um, I'd like to, but I'm just quite busy at the moment. I'm just so busy.
Yeah,
I've probably got the poems to do it. I've got so many. But I think again, I'm I don't know why. I get bored quite easily. I honestly I can move on from things really easily. And I've got the book out, great. But if I'm gonna do another book, which I do want to do, I want to do something different again. I don't want to just
yeah,
do my normal poetry. I really want to do a children's book or like children's poetry or children's poetry story. That's what I'd love to do. Um, and I could quite easily release another book, but I'm like, I'd rather just, I just want to do something different. I'm always like, I always want to do something different because I get bored easily. Like that's why I sort of like moved out of the Manchester scene. And this is no slam on the Manchester scene. I just got bored of Manchester. So
yeah,
that's why I moved to, I did more stuff in Liverpool. I've done stuff in Leeds because I just need to move on and keep the love for it going because I will just stop doing it because I'll just
yeah,
get bored of it. And I don't want that. Which is why I do all different kinds of poetry as well, and also moved into like comedy now. Um, so I've done that, but yeah, my book, Lovely Chubbly, it's great. I think I'd I don't know. I sort of stopped selling it as well. Like last night was the first time I've started to sell it in months because literally the girl who was running it was like, bring your book, that you need to bring your books. I just sort of stopped doing it because again, I just sort of like got a bit bored of doing it.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, I was in a bit of a torn position with it because yeah, I don't know. I've just been sort of I've had it for quite a while now, and I just don't want people to get bored of me and bored of it. But
Yeah.
then I always feel like I'm with a new audience all the time. But yeah, I'm also really wary of that. Is that I still do my Greg stuff. I still do my Binfluencer stuff and things like that, and I'm just really wary. I've been doing that for like a year and a half, 2 years now, and I know that's my bread and butter, and I'll never stop doing it because that's what people love, and that's like the big hits.
Yeah.
But I'm also really wary. Again, that's why I moved out of Manchester scene a little bit because I'm wary that everyone's seen all my poetry. Even though I've got loads of new stuff, and I do try that all the time, I just get really scared that people get bored of me.
Yeah.
That's why. But yeah, I still do it all. But yeah, my book, it's all about male body positivity, mental health. It's got loads of different chapters. So it sort of starts with that, and then moves into sort of more nostalgic stuff. I'm really big on nostalgia, like 90s and noughties stuff. And then yeah, again moves into sort of like my upbringing, my childhood. There's a few rants in there, there's comedy. So yeah, it's quite a little collection, let's say.
It sounds like it takes you on a journey, and I know because I've read it, and I personally really like the collection. Obviously, I identify as a woman, but I think within the whole talk about toxic masculinity, something that women can relate to still, they experience that quite a lot. And about body image, I think everybody on the planet,
Mm.
probably experiences that in some way. We all wake up sometimes and go, oh, I feel like utter shit today. And I think sometimes just seeing a little bit of positive talk about that in black and white on paper, in poetry form especially, when it is so vulnerable, it is so raw, it can really make a difference. So yeah, go, I mean, if you're listening to this, go and check out Tom's book, like, and just go and watch him perform, because genuinely, like, you're just a joy to watch, you really are. But yeah, it's just, I totally understand what you mean about the whole book situation as well, because I found that for me, I kind of was in a similar boat. I stopped pushing the sales of the book as much because of what was going on in my own life, personally, professionally as well. And I think you do kind of have to go with the flow a little bit. And, that's not a bad thing. That's just how life is, that's the way the cookie crumbles, sort of thing. And you have to be kind to yourself as a writer. You can't always come out with poems on the days that you want, at the times that you want. The same as being able to sell it. I'm certain we've all, as poets, been to open mics where you've maybe not been feeling up to it at all, but you've still gone.
Mm.
And you just think, me being here is enough. I don't have to push the sales of my book. And weirdly, sometimes those are the times where you leave feeling even better about everything, about your writing. And yeah, it's just, it seems like a really cathartic experience when that happens.
I'm
Um,
also just really wary as well that my book's been out quite a while now. This must be coming up to 2 years or over that now. And there's other poets who their collections are new,
yes,
and I don't. Just me being big headed? I don't know. And I don't mean it to be in any way, shape, or form. I don't want to sell my book and take sales away from another poet whose book and journey is new,
yeah,
whereas mine isn't. And I'm
yeah,
not saying that that's me being better than another poet in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that I don't want someone to buy my book that I've got the sales from that and I'm quite happy with how it's done. But I also don't want to be there's and also I'm really wary that there's like three other poets selling their book at the same time. It's
yeah,
died down a lot since, but yeah, I'm also just wary of like I don't want to overwhelm the audience of like you start to become like some Canary Wharf trade stock salesman. Where you're like, come on, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. Don't buy that one over there. Come on, buy this one, blah blah blah. And then
yeah,
or that members feel bad because, and this is what I started to get to feel bad is I couldn't fucking afford to buy all these books.
yeah,
Like, yeah, and you feel so bad. You buy one, And then you feel bad for not buying the others. So then you audience members like start buying all three, and they can't afford it. And then you buy one person's book, and they're like, "Why have you not bought my book?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, I don't know. It's just mad."
I totally get that. I've definitely been in that situation before. I think when I first started sort of promoting my book, there was a point where quite a lot of friends of mine were also releasing books,
Yeah,
and they might get a copy of mine, but I can't get a copy of theirs because I
yeah,
just didn't have the money. And I said to them, I will get a copy of your book when I'm able to, I will. And please consider that a promise. And I did.
mm,
I would never, if I made a promise like that, then I would absolutely, go back and buy a copy of their book. But it's awful. That feeling that it's, you feel guilty, but at the
yeah,
same time, like, that's just the way, that's the way the world is. And unfortunately, as creatives, we often find that we don't have a lot of money. Like, we give so much of ourselves, our time, our energy, our passion, and the money that we get in return is not often reflective of that. But no, I totally understand what you mean, and I think as well, I was what you were saying there is completely valid about some audience members might gravitate towards one sort of writer's style and their book, and maybe not to somebody else's. And that can impact you. But I think at the same time, and I'm sure you feel this way as well, it's like when you walk into Waterstones and you're looking at all the books
mm,
that they have, poetry collections. I know for me, I'm attracted to what's on the front cover sometimes.
mm,
So if I see a great cover, I'm like, oh, I have no idea who this writer is, no idea what the book's about. I'm just going to go for
mm.
it. I'm going to read it, see if I like it. I remember doing that once with a poetry collection that had a fish on the front, and it was this beautifully illustrated orange, like goldfish, basically. And it turned out to be the most beautiful book I'd literally ever read. And I was like, I can't believe I would never in a million years would have like researched that and gone, oh yeah, that's a book I would enjoy. But I think sometimes it is just as simple as that. Like,
Mm.
your book cover is very eye catching. It's, I know for me, if I saw that in any shop, I would go, yeah, I'm probably gonna like that, you
Mm.
know. But yeah, that's so interesting. That's mad. I was going to speak to you as well, and I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in this because all of us have had completely different journeys into the arts. We all started somewhere. And your journey from, I guess, an outsider's perspective like mine, it's been absolutely fascinating to watch because you started out as more of an actor. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, your career has evolved in such an interesting way.
Yeah.
And I mean, how did that even come to be? And I suppose, where did you start? Like, where did you and when did you realize that performing was your sort of bread and butter, as you say?
Um, ugh, I've done everything. When I say I get bored, I've literally done everything. I've done acting, I've done producing, I've done writing, directing, poetry, I've done podcasting. I've done it all because like I said, I just love trying new things.
Yeah.
So all that has just led me to like so many different paths. But I guess where did it all begin? I don't know. Uh in I'm trying to think now. Basically in school, I was all I always just loved drama. I loved expressing myself in that way. And I guess I've never done anything any different. Um, working class lad from Bolton, I wasn't predicted any sort of GCSEs or anything like that, but I knew I loved to sort of like act and perform and things like that. Be the center of attention, that's me. Um, and then, yeah, I guess that when I got like an A in drama, I thought, oh, I'll do this. Then I did it in college, and then I couldn't really afford. I went to uni, but that's only because I couldn't afford drama school and things like that. So then, yeah, so then I moved to London and on a whim because I couldn't go get like the drama school, the acting training, or anything like that. So I just sort of really took a punt to go down to London and do it. And I was really had a bit of a chip on my shoulder because I knew that being a working class creative, I couldn't afford a lot of things, and um, it was quite hard in that way. So I really sort of went in on the industry um, as a whole, and as sort of like I sort of really became a spokesperson for working class actors and artists in London, well, and the UK, because I did a stage article all about it. I went toe to toe with Equity, did that, and then I set up my own theatre company called Actor Awareness, which was all for working class actors, writers, and directors to basically showcase themselves. Because I knew that basically, and this is probably just absolutely simplifying it, but the drama training's great, but you all that whole 3 years of training is all for that drama showcase at the end. So I was like, what if we just skip the 3 years and just do a drama showcase and in London and pay people? And that's what I did. I set up these, they're called scratch nights, which is basically like short scripts under different themes. So I set them under different themes, and I got sponsorship for it. And I did it in like the heart of the West End. So I did it in Spotlight in Leicester Square. And I was just tenacious with it. And I just sort of got funding. I got free space, which is mad in London. But because I was really passionate about giving working class voices a chance to shine and doing these showcases, and I would get panelists. So I'd get casting directors on there, I'd get directors, producers, just come and judge, not really judge, it's just basically putting in front of these creatives, and use it as a massive networking opportunity. And I did that for like 8 years. But in that time, I'd never been trained to write in my life. I got a C in English and I scraped that. But because I did these scratch notes when I first started, I didn't have many script people submitting their scripts because obviously it was new and like, who am I? So I started like writing short comedy sketches to sort of go in there as well. And then I sort of did that, and then I wrote my debut play. I used to work in a call center, and oh my god, it was so mind numbing that I could literally just muscle memory would just say the script in my head, and I would just be there writing a play
I love
while I was
that.
doing the call center work. And then yeah, I did my debut play. It was called Netflix and Chill. It was all about the inner monologues of what people go through when they're Netflix and chilling, but also really honed in on male mental health and what it's like working in. I used to be a chef, so like chefs in kitchens, and yeah, it's really good, and I really want to bring it back at some point as well, because it got I put it on in London in the Drayton Arms, and yeah, it got nominated for a couple of awards in London, which is amazing for a debut show. But then lockdown hit, and everything just sort of stopped. And I was lucky because my show ended a week before lockdown.
Oh wow.
And so I had that full momentum of my show and ready to sort of like go with it. And then obviously the world stopped. And I was
Yeah.
really gutted that that whole momentum just sort of stopped. But I really discovered writing, and I couldn't be asked writing a new play. So I started writing poetry. And my mate, Matt, who's the Thirsty Poet, I saw him been doing poetry for ages, and we've been, really good mates since we were kids. And I was like, oh, I really like your poetry. Maybe I'll have a look at it. And then I discovered like our kid, and then I discovered JB Barrington, and all those. And I was like, oh my god, like why? I always just thought poetry was crap and just for like posh people, and I've always ever seen it in that place. But then when I see it with Northern voices and stories that I care about and things like that. I've just never been shown that side of it. And I was like, oh, I'd love to maybe do something like that. But also still with my playwriting hat on. So the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester, they were doing script call outs for like short pieces. So I did a short play, but all in spoken word about the pandemic of homelessness during the pandemic, because that the homelessness pandemic was a pandemic in itself. So I did this short 20-25 minute play all around that, but it was all in spoken word. And again, that won. So it got put on as part of that. But then because I really enjoyed writing in that style, I started breaking off and writing actual poetry. So I guess that brings us to like now, I guess. Yeah.
Amazing. You know what? I did not know that you'd been a chef. That has
Yeah.
just blown my mind.
10 years.
You've literally done a bit of everything. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I think in a lot of ways, me and you are quite similar in terms of the amount of different things we've tried and explored.
Mm,
And I think it, like you say, it keeps that spark and that love for what we do alive.
yeah.
And when you're constantly trying new and different things, you're kind of challenging yourself. I don't know about you, but like for me, I find that I don't really, and I don't mean this in a big headed way at all, and it's sort of similar to what you said before, but I don't view other people's poetry or work as competition to mine.
Yes.
I think of my past work and my own kind of drive, all of that. It's like I'm in competition with myself.
Mm,
Like I'm always trying to be the sort of most authentic version of myself within the work that I create.
mm,
And I think because of that, there's this drive to keep moving forward, to keep making relevant work. And I definitely get that from you as well. And I think in recent months, especially with the positive poems that you've been putting all across the UK, that feels like very authentic to you. I think the thing that I've noticed in your work across the years is you want to make a difference. You absolutely want to make a difference. You want people to relate to what you're saying, and I think really a lot of poets want that. That's our goal, really, isn't it?
yeah.
You know, you want people to connect to what you're saying in the hope that it might make them feel brighter, a bit better. It
Yeah.
might contextualize what it is they're going through. You know, if it is something difficult. And, you know, just going back to what we were saying before about the political poetry that you shared, I think a lot of people were really struggling during that time. And even now, there's a lot of really negative stuff going on in the world. And sometimes feeling that anger is absolutely valid. Like we as human beings are going to feel a whole plethora of things towards these matters, these issues. And when, again, when you see somebody that is equally as angry as you, that's when really positive change can happen. And
Mm.
suddenly you start to go, right, I'm not the only one. How can we fix this? What can we do to make this better? So, I mean, kudos to you, man, for just being so ballsy with everything that you do and just going for it.
Mm.
Um,
I just think as well with poetry, like I had that negative perception of poetry growing up, and literally until mid-20s, maybe, that I didn't like poetry because I never thought it spoke to me. But there was a guy when I lived in London. He was a poet, and he would genuinely just go around in the pub on a Friday night and just tell people poetry. And I'd be like, oh, shut up, mate, you fucking wanker. Like, oh my God. But when I heard his poetry, it was insane. It was like proper funny, cheesy poetry. It was like, he did like this cheese poem. It was like, oh my God, I can't camembert it and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, fair play, that's good. I like that.
yeah.
My first like real introduction to poetry. And I still, that's why I describe myself as a pub poet, is
Hmm.
because of him going round in a pub in East London where no one gave a shit, but he would do his poetry to people and they'd go, that's pretty decent, that. And I pride myself on that, is that I feel I could go into any pub in the north or anywhere in the UK and I could pick a poem based of mine, obviously. Um, and I could get people to listen by the end of it. And that's what I want to pride myself on, is that change people's perception of poetry to by the end of it go, that's not bad. I don't want them to love it, and I'm not asked about if they don't buy my book, but at least at the end of it going, oh, that's all right, actually. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Like, that's all we can ask for.
Yeah. It's sort of like demystifying this perception, isn't it? Of
Yeah.
it is a certain class of people, it is a certain type of person that writes a poem. Anyone can write poetry. Doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. And I think poetry's really evolved. Like you say, people deliver it in lots of different ways now. Spoken word poetry is probably bigger now than it ever has been.
Yeah.
and it is such a beautiful art form. Like, I've seen so many performances that have truly moved me and changed my perception of poetry. And I've been writing poetry now for several years, like yourself. And the fact that it continues to evolve, like my perception and what I think poetry is and should be, that just goes to show how far we've come in terms of sort of making it accessible to everyone. I do think, and maybe I'm slightly biased on this, but I do think that the Manchester poets, especially, kind of broke a lot of barriers a couple of years
Yeah.
ago. That was when things
That
really started.
boom, honestly, after lockdown, that boom
Yeah,
of poets that we were part of, that all sort of kicked off around saying. I think saying was a massive catalyst for that.
yeah,
And just that group of like, me, you, Lol, Nathan, like just that, Tonks, all that, those, there was just like 30, 40, 50 poets that all just sort of boomed at the same time. Not
yeah,
all of them still sort of doing it as regular now, but I think there was just a real big movement of poetry around that time. I don't think it was just Manchester. I do think that happened in cities across the
yeah,
UK. It's just that obviously we were part of the Manchester one, but it was mad. And I don't know, maybe there'll be a documentary about it in years to come. Who knows? But I do think it was mad that that was a real gear shift in poetry. I completely agree with you because you talk about, I'm not comparing us to that, but when Camden was at its peak, and I was just going to watch a documentary recently about Camden and how that landscape changed and launched so many careers. I do look back like now. I was thinking about the event, going, God, how many amazing poets came out of that like boom out of lockdown?
yeah,
Like everyone was so suppressed, so angry, so upset that everyone just had something to say. And everyone just sort of like those first like year out of lockdown, God, those poaching acts left, right, and centre couldn't even keep up. It's calmed down a bit now, but yeah, it just seemed like everyone had something to say, and
yeah,
everyone was just like so supportive, and that is why I quit acting and quit performing in that sense is because I realized that acting was quite toxic in terms of everyone was competing, everyone was like out for their own for themselves. But then when I got thrusted into this poetry world where everyone was so supportive and no one was competing with each other, no one was like, oh my god, my poem's better than yours or whatever. Everyone was so collaborative and positive, and even if they were negative in their poetry in terms of what they were saying, in terms of like their political stances and all and everything they had to say, it was still positive in terms of people supporting that as well. So yeah, hey, look, we were part of a revolution, baby.
I know. Oh, it's so true, and I honestly love that. That the feeling that I got after lockdown, being a part of such a collective, was it was just like fierce and like we were a force to be reckoned with, and being a part of that, knowing that we had such incredible people around us, so supportive, so genuinely like caring about each other, it was just magical, really. Oh, this has been such a lovely chat, and I wanted to finish off by asking you this question. Well, actually, it's kind of two questions. First of all, where do you get the most inspiration from? And second of all, to anyone that might be listening, what advice do you have to them in terms of either being creative, putting your work out there, or just generally sort of sustaining a career in this industry?
um First question. I'm very reactive as a poet, I think. Is I don't have something that I will manifest. I won't write something. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna write about this, but give me like 2 weeks, like think about it and that. I'm really not like that. I will see something on TikTok or Instagram or the news or whatever, and I'll write it there and then, or within like that day. Um, I'm very reactive. Like even if it's something like if I see a video about body positivity that really sort of inspires me, I'll go, oh my God, I need to write that. And I'll write it on train. I'm like there and then. And I'm one of those poets as well that I won't edit my work. To, maybe that's rightly or wrongly. If that is the poem that I have written, that is the poem that will be performed. I very rarely go back and over analyze my poetry. I'm very raw. I don't know how to write. I don't know structure or anything like that. So I'm not. So because I've never been trained to be like that. I don't overanalyze and go, oh my God, my grammar in there. Oh my God, I must change some of the ways that that's said. I'll literally write the poem, done. And that's it. Yeah, I might go back to it and change a couple of words because when I read it out loud, it doesn't quite come across.
Yeah.
And I'll change things because it's better it doesn't work it might work when it's written down, but saying it loud doesn't work. I'll change it for that. But that is it. And I'm really reactive with my poetry. If something inspires me or pisses me off or makes me laugh, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
And then advice. Well, I mean, I was with New Poets last night, and someone asked me the exact same thing. Also, I have huge imposter syndrome. I don't feel like I have any say on why I should be giving advice to people because I'm not. I don't feel myself like that, but I will give some anyway, because of just my own personal journey. And what I said to them, and what I've said to a few sort of new poets who have asked me, is just do as many open mics as you can. And why I say that is because they were like, oh my God, how can I be like you in headline? And I'm like, because I just do it. Like, I just go. There was times, especially around the book and stuff like that, I was killing myself a little bit. I was doing 2-3 poetry nights a week, sort of get myself out there and do that. And I'm not saying everyone should do that, but I'm saying you should gig regularly because, unfortunately, with poetry, it is who you know. And that is, and I'm sorry if that annoys people, but that is literally who it is. And it's not in a bad way. It's just because you build connections with people in the poetry scene. If they love your work, they'll book you for a poetry night.
Yeah.
And just the more you gig, the more people you meet, the more connections you'll make, and the more you'll sort of climb that poetry ladder. What the ceiling is, I don't know. What you're climbing, I don't know. But if you want to get to that, set yourself goals. Do you want a headline slot? Do you want to get paid? Do you want to get commissioned? Do you want to teach it? Do you want set yourself a goal and just like sort of slowly build your way up like that. But I would just say is gig as regularly as you can because you'll meet people and it'll change your writing, it will change your style because you'll watch poetry all the time. I'm really bad as well. I don't like reading poetry. I'm not a reader. So I'm really apologize for that. I like listening to it much more. So because I don't read it, I much prefer to go and just listen and do it. And yeah, so that's probably my biggest advice I say is just go out and do as many poetry nights as you can if that's what you like to do. Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so strange that you say that as well because in the last podcast episode, Stevie also said that. He said,
"Oh, really?"
Yeah, he said just put your work out there, go to different nights, meet different people, and to further that, I then said how much other people's work can inspire your own. And those connections that you form with the different poets and writers that you meet will naturally allow your own work to evolve and change in a really beautiful way. And yeah, I could not agree more with that. That is very, very sound advice. Thank you, Tom. Well, that feels like a really lovely point to end this podcast. And I just want to thank you again, Tom, for sharing such brilliant stories with us and your advice. Definitely cannot recommend that enough to anyone listening. Maybe you are a poet and you want to put your words out there, but you're not sure how. Get yourself to, one of Blue Balloon's open mics or get yourself to another that is in the Northwest. There are tons, and we were chatting about this just before we started recording. There are tons to get involved with. So, Tom, really important, just before we go, where can we find you on social media?
At the Chubby Northerner on TikTok and Instagram is probably the best place.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a comment, and we'll see you next week on Friday. Bye, everyone.